Welcome to Keep Going, a podcast about failure and success, hosted by John Biggs. Every week, we talk to an amazing person about a time they failed and what they learned. And remember, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show, we have Dr. Rod Berger. He's an author, storyteller, you're doing consulting, and you have a brand new book out called The Narrative Edge. So I want you to tell us all about that.
Well, thanks, John. It's so nice to see you again and to be on your show. Maybe I'll learn a little bit about some of my successes and my failure through your analysis today.
Capable. There's no analysis. It's mostly just I just sit here quietly while people just tell me all these terrible things about.
And
themselves.
Then they say, "I just love talking to you."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm the guy. I'd listen.
Well, look, I appreciate the question about the book. As you know, as a writer, I think that the war that we may have inside our own, sort of the walls of our own head as to what might be beneficial for folks, what I think honors the stories that we've been a part of, and then sort of packages that all together. The Narrative Edge is a book that, I worked really hard on sharing the stories that I've been so incredibly lucky to capture and to be around and in the presence of and witness, and, cultures that are not like what I know here in the U.S., traditions, stories. It's just been a whirlwind for me, especially in the last 5 years. And so the Narrative Edge, I really want to push the bounds. I want you to experience story from every angle, because I think it's interesting, John, that, so many people will say, oh, storytelling, that's nice to have, right? Or it's the buzzword of the day. And it's like, no, actually story is everywhere. And these may be sort of trite examples, but, if you get pulled over right now for speeding, John, as that officer is walking up to your car, you know what you're thinking? What is my story? You go on a blind date or a first date, as you're getting ready, you're going through your own sort of card catalog of stories that might present you in a better or, the best light possible for that individual. You go to a job interview. What are you thinking about as you're getting in the elevator? What story am I going to share, or what stories am I going to share? So stories everywhere, right? Even when we're young and you're a kid and you take something you shouldn't out of the pantry or the refrigerator and you get caught, the first thing a little kid thinks about is, what's my story? Mm-hmm. So I'm a kid in a candy store now because everybody's talking about it, but it's not something that just sort of showed up. It's like the binding agent for our civilization is story and the different forms that is expressed. And so I take you look, this 35% of this book is memoir in that regard, because I made a conscious decision. You know what was the most difficult part of the book, which is going to sound maybe pretty silly to someone like you as a writer, was the subtitle. Mm-hmm. Because I thought of that as incredibly valuable real estate. And so authentic storytelling that meets the moment, that was not just something that was a whim with the publisher. That was really, really thought about and intentional. And when I came to that, I said, I can't write a book about storytelling if I don't incorporate in my own experiences of story. Because then it's just me, as a sage on the stage. And for anybody who knows me, I can't handle that. Like, that's not in my DNA. And so I have to show my own sort of vulnerabilities in how stories impacted me and how it continues to impact me. I take you from, refugee camps to behind the scenes at Formula One to time spent in Oslo, where you and I met. And that was very intentional.
So I think one of the, as you said, a lot of people think story is just kind of like nice to have. I've met plenty of CEOs who just can't tell a story, right? I mean, this show is essentially supposed to be about storytelling. I mean, people are supposed to come on and say, this terrible thing happened to me and here's how I fixed it. I get that 1 out of every 4 people who can actually tell that story well. And it doesn't bother me, because just in the process of them kind of like wrestling with the thought, we can pull out a lot of interesting information. What do you think is the primary driver for folks who just can't wrap their head around that the world needs to be reduced down to stories?
I think there's a fear of not being valued, right? I kind of go back to, it's that elementary school. This is very US centric, but the elementary school where the stage is in the cafeteria and you get thrown into a school play in 3rd grade because you have to do it. There's no choice. And, maybe this year, John, you play the oak tree and maybe I play the villain, or, you're the hero and I'm the oak tree or the park bench. I think that those early lessons of how we tell story together and where we fit, and then that sort of evolves into, games on the playground, right? Red Rover, and who's going to like pick me, right? Who's going to pick me then for a sports team, and sort of like you are valuable enough to be selected. And I think one of the reasons why we struggle to, I guess, embrace storytelling, especially from a leadership perspective, is because I think we're really scared about the narrative that might be wrapped around us if we actively sort of put our toes in the water and say, I need to understand my story. But you're exactly right. I resonate with that, because I can't tell you how many executives I will collaborate with and no one's supposed to know I'm collaborating with them, because they are coming saying, I don't know what I need to know, but I know that I haven't really found my voice. And I'm not sure if this is a legacy issue that I'm having or that I want to write a book someday, but I need to figure out what my story is and or how it might apply to the ways in which I operate, within the world. But I think there's a great fear of failure, that whatever my contribution is not going to be valued. And so I don't want to be a part of a story where there's a percent, there's some, percent chance that it's not going to be valued. Mm-hmm. We want a sure thing. And I don't think any of us feel very secure that we've picked the sure path, potentially the partner or the city we live in, or any number of decisions. And if we start telling those stories, we run the risk of being very exposed and vulnerable to the outside world's criticisms.
Yeah, that's an interesting viewpoint, because that's sort of like for my money, a storyteller and storytelling, the process is about being vulnerable, because if you're in a job interview, you have to be vulnerable. Hey, this terrible thing happened. I fixed it this way. Or we did this, it didn't work out as well, but I single-handedly solved the problem. A lot of people don't see that. They hear the first part, but they don't hear the second part. What do you do to teach folks how to tell stories?
So I'm glad you asked that question. The way I'll start this is kind of the way that Wiley, my publisher, came to me. So I know I was very lucky that they reached out to me. And at first I just assumed, silly me, that they were going to want a book that was like, the 5 best ways to tell a story. And I just said that to them. I said, if that's what you're looking for, then I'm the wrong person for a book on storytelling, because I think storytelling lives within the pause, right? It lives between, on an elevator between 2 floors. And I think if we're going to get to being better storytellers, we again have to understand our own origin story. It doesn't mean that we're talking about sort of a, in-depth psychoanalytic approach, where you have to lay on a couch and figure out why you do or respond to the world the way that you do based on any level or spectrum of trauma or experience that didn't go your way as a young person and into adulthood. But I think to your point, it underscores vulnerability and the value of that, because that's the stuff that's the connective tissue between people, right? This is why hiring managers, they're going to hire based on cultural fit. If you have 2 equal candidates, right? It's going to go, no. We're going to hire John because John fits in with the team that we envision him with, right? And so if you're going to be a better storyteller, one, you have to be a really good listener and observe how people tell stories and their reactions. I think we're so quick to fill in the void with words, images, social media posts. It's like sometimes being that oak tree and observing can sort of do a body good, like, a milk commercial, the old milk commercials. So I think you have to start there. I don't think it's something that you can manufacture. John, I think don't forget you're telling a story, and this is the sort of the recipe. The story is incredibly messy, and everybody is different with their timing, the way they deliver lines, they think about the relationships that words have. You can have 2 people. It's like my 11-year-old daughter, for whatever reason, I'm very biased, but her turn of phrase as an 11-year-old is pretty incredible. And I glean a lot of, pride from that just because she's my daughter. But, she wants to talk to me about rhythm of words, right? She ran for student council in her speech. And what did she talk about? It was like she wanted to talk about the delivery, right? That's part of her storytelling. I'm sure you have friends. I've got a buddy of mine who's a stand-up comedian and very successful in the movie industry. And he may not have the most incredible sort of verbiage that he's utilizing, but his pacing, his use of the breath, right? The way in which he punches different lines, he's a fantastic storyteller. So it's finding kind of where your comfort is. And, I think we all know our limits. I remember when I started public speaking years ago, I was very lucky. I started when I was in high school because I had a teacher that saw something and kind of kept pushing me. One time, John, I tried to be something that wasn't me when it came to storytelling. And boy, did I bomb. I mean, it was awful. Like even just thinking about it now, I want to go lay down and take a nap. It was horrible, only because I was not myself, right? I was too worried about the response from the audience. That's never going to work. But whenever you're genuine and you can at least express it based on how you're feeling, more often than not, it's received quite well, even through difficult conversations or stories that you have to relate, right? We had a parent meeting for a soccer team last night, and it wasn't a friendly meeting from the parent side, right? There were some things that have gone on for my son's team. Well, what are we talking about? Each parent is relaying basically their experience of a story that's been told over the last 6 weeks. Even though there were some difficult things that were mentioned and discussed, I think it was received well amongst sort of the entire group and the coaches, because people were being honest about their feelings. It wasn't just something prescribed. So I think you have to start there. And then I think you can develop over time, right? I think of life as a series of at-bats, like baseball player. Just get me up to the plate. I may swing and miss and go down on 3 straight curveballs. That's fine, because guess what? My eye's going to start picking up that curveball the next time I get that next at bat. And that to me that's really the meat of storytelling, is allowing yourself to sit in that and understand it. The easiest part is telling the story if you were honest about that experience and how it made you feel.
How do you convince someone to work on their soft skills? How do you convince someone to go take an improv class or get a speaking coach?
Wow. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question. So I like that a lot. Convince. I don't know if it's about, I don't know if I would be very good at convincing. I would think that you and I share this, right? Our love of curiosity, of just being curious, and being curious sometimes takes us into some of these weird back alleys, and sometimes it really is a point of connection, right, between other people. I don't even know if we have to be honest with you, right? Like when you're doing an interview, right, and you're working up an article, but you're talking to somebody, the subject of that story. I think if you do your job or I do my job, and sort of that capture of the story, that experience alone is going to be enough to trigger something in that individual that says, wow, I kind of like that. I mean, look, human nature is we like to talk about ourselves. For whatever reason, we've downloaded that. Now, that's just a part of our sort of central computer. And so because of that, when you have an experience where you have someone who understands the give and take of story, I think that's the convincing, right? It's a bit of a drug too. If you can start to get on the train of sharing a story and then asking questions to, in return, ask about someone else's story, you don't ever want to go back to the station ever. I don't know about you and your travels around the world, but it is an absolute drug in that regard. It's returning your car to the rental, station at the airport. When you cross over those spikes, you can't back up. It's like when you connect with a human because you've sat and listened to their story, you want to share in a similar way, I think. So I don't know how good I would be at convincing someone. But I think my approach, if that was my objective, you sort of sent me out as a mission impossible, I would approach it as asking questions that would really make that individual think. And based on that, for them to realize themselves, wow, I think I need to explore a little bit more about why I lead this way, or why I'm reticent to change or to taking a leap of faith.
What are some examples of folks who did it poorly, right? Who just don't see how stories are built, how in the telling they build themselves up, all kinds of other weird stuff. Do you have any examples of someone who just shouldn't have been telling stories?
I have one that comes to mind that I've referenced before, but I mean, it's one of those, it's sort of the response, is like, well, how long is the show? Because it's sort of the public examples are everywhere, right? It's the classic, and I would love to know if you disagree with this, but it's the classic, pitch that someone gets if they're a writer and they get a pitch from, even if it could be an internal PR team or outsourced, and it's, we have a story for you, right? It's all about what they have done. And that to me is an epic failure. They don't understand what a story is, right? They're just they're propping up something under the cover of story when it's not. It's like, no, this is a Trojan horse. You just want people to sort of dive in and then go, oh, wow, I want to buy whatever you're offering. There was one individual that I interviewed, and I interviewed her a couple of times over the span probably of 3 years. And I'll give you the end I'll start with the end. After the last time I interviewed her, I called up the PR individual that had made the connection. And I just said, please don't ever reach out again. Like, you're very pleasant, and she's incredibly nice as well. The sort of the subject of the article, I said, because she's so buttoned up, there's absolutely no room for oxygen in that room. And I'm not about talking points. I'm about finding angles that are interesting, a little bit to the left of center or right of center, right? Not speaking politically. And she was so buttoned up, there was just no room, right? You felt as if you were in a sterile environment where surgery could be performed and you would have no fear of any bacteria getting in, right? Sort of the messiness of life serving as bacteria. And that has always stuck with me because I take pride in being able to find an angle that's just interesting, not because I'm like trying to find something on somebody, not that at all. It's just reading the room, reading the energy or the individual, or thinking out loud to myself even how I might feel based on wherever they are in their profession or sort of what's on the docket or what's exciting to them. I will tell people all the time. It's like when people reach out to me to capture a story, whether it's for a media project or something formal, it's like, look, if I can see this in a press release, I'm not going to write about it. I've got to find something else. Go find a different writer for that, because we have enough automation out there that we can regurgitate a press release and have it tell the audience whatever they want. So there are plenty of people out there, and it's because I think there's this fear that they have to be something. They have to play a certain character in the story. And in that character, oftentimes it'll be a CEO that they're so rigid that all they know are their talking points. Or it's been with celebrities who they're just so used to being prepped over and over and over that they just assume you're going to, like, the next question John's going to ask is this. And it's like, no, John asked you something very different, right? And you sort of get them off that loop that they're on. So those, to me, those examples are the examples of this are all over the place. We see it, but a lot of it is talking to and treating it as if it all has to be packaged up so nice and pretty, like some birthday present.
So folks can grab the book that's out now, and you also have a consulting practice. Can you make a boring CEO better?
That's a great one. Can I make a boring CEO better? I sure hope I can. Yeah, I'd like to think that I can. Oftentimes, the process is actually walking them through. I interview them, series of interviews. We don't make them public, right? But it allows them to sit sort of in a position where they have to focus on like running through their own internal archives from every question I ask and finding which sequence or which combination helps to express how they're feeling, what they learned through something, and how they project forward. And through that, you learn a lot about individuals, right? You study the transcripts together. You sort of look how that maps to what they've done publicly, whether they've done a TED or TEDx talk, things that have been recorded, other podcast or media. Were they really connected to the voice that they put out there? And so that's how I love to work with folks, is to be able to do that from behind the scenes, because oftentimes they don't get that practice, right? They feel like they have to be on the minute their alarm goes off in the morning, and they don't get that opportunity to say, gosh, that just is not what I'm trying to get across, right? I sound like I am patronizing to the audience. And if that's happening, then that's going to impact our business, right? Or my ability to attract talent. So sometimes it's good to see that mirror, but to actually have a conversation with that mirror in a way that only, I think, people who are gluttons for punishment and love digesting everybody's story can be and do for them. So that's how I approach it. I
mean, from a selfish standpoint, if you would talk to more CEOs like I have to talk to them, then maybe so you could train them to tell more interesting stories, and this podcast would be on par with freaking Radiolab ultimately.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's great about the podcast medium, right? You're so right. You kind of sit down with someone and say, because it is great. I actually love working with people that have been on podcasts and that sort of thing, because it's like grist for the mill. You can look at it and go, okay, now how do you think you came across, John? Like, we can break it down and say, it seems like you're always starting with, this is your starting point in several of these interviews. And they don't even recognize it. Even just the pattern recognition, it doesn't sort of hit or ping for them. And when you draw that out, okay, is this conveying what you want to convey? Was there an opening there to share something personal and you declined, right? To share? Maybe that was a missed opportunity for people to say, you know what? I like John. I've never met John, but I can get behind that message,
All right. Well, I'm going to send folks over to drrodberger.com. I want anybody who's about to come on the podcast in the next 2 or 3 months. I need you to go talk to him. Get a 2-hour consult. I need a cut from this as well, Rod. But I think that's we'll see how that shakes out.
Okay. Hey, let's do it.
All right. This has been Keep Going. I'm John Biggs. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. Remember, Keep Going is entirely listener supported. If you're listening to this, please head over to keepgoingpod.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast for as little as $5 a month. This is a labor of love, and every little bit helps. Thanks for listening.